Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Barry Wineroth, and I'd just like to share a little bit with you about my life and how I met Jesus in my life. When I was back in the 1960s, I was in a rock and roll band, and we had a couple of records out, and we were touring around and playing with some large groups, people like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Santana, Chicago, Ray Charles, and things like that. And at that time, I wasn't a Christian, and and I thought that the greatest thing in the world would be that I could be a rock star like some of those people that we played with. Well, what after getting a chance to actually see them up close rather than just listening to their records and things like that, I realized that they were very sad people. Almost all of them were using drugs and or alcohol. Janis Joplin drank a fifth of whiskey just before she went on stage, and I was backstage and I saw that, and I said, if this is what rock stars are like, maybe I'm missing the boat here. And so I, uh, you know, had been raised in a Christian home, and my mother was always taking us to family camps in the summer, and so this a family camp was coming up, and so she asked if I would go, and of course said yes, I would. This was in my 20s. I was had just graduated from college, and I was still playing in my rock and roll band and loving playing. I just realized that I didn't want to get famous and get weird like all those other people. So I loved my band. But anyway, so we went to this conference, and a 17-year-old boy came up to me after they had the sermon about asking people that if they would like to come to the Lord. And I didn't go forward. And this boy came to me and he said, well, Barry, how come you didn't accept Jesus tonight? Because you're a good person. And I said, well, the, first of all, I don't want to get out of my rock and roll band. And he said, well, God never expects you to do something that you don't want to do. He said, he'll never ask you to get out of your rock and roll band. If you get out of your rock and roll band, it will be because you want to serve him in some other capacity. And so I said, well, I'm not good enough. And he goes, well, nobody's good enough. And that's why we need the Lord in our lives, so that when we accept him, he allows the Holy Spirit to come into our lives and change us and make us more like his son, Jesus. Well, I remember saying two or three other things, to try to get out of the conversation. And every time this boy had the right answer for me. So that night, I just didn't go forward. I just went back to my cabin, and all night long I couldn't sleep because everything that he had said and everything that it was said in the sermon just kept rolling through my head. So the following morning, when they were going to be baptizing those that had accepted the Lord, they said, is there anyone else out there that wants to receive Jesus as his personal Lord and Savior? And I just jumped right up. I didn't even know that I was going to do it or anything, but I jumped right up and went forward and was baptized. And I didn't have any wow, I can see fireworks all of a sudden, or any big change in me at that moment. But what I did find is that now that when I would go play in my band and I was watching the people in the audience and they were smoking and drinking and doing other things, and I never really noticed those things before. I was so into my music that I didn't notice them. Well, now I started noticing them, and it just didn't seem right. I mean, it was just some things that I didn't want to continue having to be around, and so believe it or not, about 9 months after I was baptized, I left my rock and roll band. I still had a music store that I had started earlier while I was in the band. So I concentrated on the music store, and as soon as I had accepted the Lord, a friend of mine said, "Well, you need to go to a Bill Gothard seminar." Well, I didn't even know who Bill Gothard was, and most people probably now don't because I haven't heard about him in years and years. But back then, he had a basic seminar that taught people about Christianity and what God expects of them and everything. Well, when I went to the Bill Gothard seminar, I was just amazed because he answered all my questions that I had about what it was like to serve the Lord and things like that. But one of the things he said is that, rock and roll and those kind of things are not good for folks, and so I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, I have a music store that sells nothing but rock and roll type stuff: guitars, amplifiers, drum sets, PA systems, and so what am I supposed to do? So I waited till after the seminar and stood in line about 45 minutes to get up to talk to Bill Gothard. And I told him that I had this music store, and I said, well, what do you think I should do? And he said, you'll find your answer in Romans 14:22, and just turned around and walked away. And I thought, I got cheated here. I was waiting in line for 45 minutes. But I went back to my seat and looked up Romans 14:22, and it said, happy is the man that condemneth himself not for the things that are allowed in his life, or that he allows in his life. And I said, what does that mean? And so I went and talked to the pastor of the church that I had started to attend, and I told him, this is what Bill Gothard said. And I said, what does it mean? And he goes, well, does your music store make you feel guilty? I mean, are you doing things there, or playing certain songs, or having certain posters and things that you wouldn't want Jesus to see? And I said, well, yeah, I know that there's posters on the walls, and we're playing a lot of this hard rock music and stuff through the PA system. And he said, well, then you need to make changes, either leave the music store or make changes in the music store so that it doesn't cause you to be feeling guilty. And so I said, okay. So I went back. I put a fish emblem up in our logo of our music store. I started playing Christian music over the loudspeaker in the store. And I took down all the posters that had sparsely clad women playing guitars and crazy things like that were on our walls of our music store. And almost immediately, my business dropped by about 10% because a bunch of the musicians that were into drugs and alcohol and not into anywhere close to religion stopped coming to the music store. And that didn't really bother me because I was doing what I thought was the right thing, and the music store was no longer making me feel guilty. Well, about 3 months later, I started getting calls from churches all over the area because they saw my Christian emblem on my TV ads, and they said, we would like to buy our PA system for our church from you, or our electric piano or drum set for our worship team. And to make a long story short, my business jumped about 30%. So it had dropped 10 and jumped up another 20 on top of that. And so I could see where God was really pleased with the stand that I took. And so he blessed me. Well, I kept the music store for 23 years, and then when my daughter April was 12 years old, I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be in an area where kids 12 years old are dating and going to parties, and that was what was happening in San Jose, California, where I lived. So I started looking around, and I remembered playing when we were touring around with my band. I remembered playing up in the Redding, Chico area, and how the kids up here were raising 4-H animals at 12 years old and not dating or not going to parties. So we just up and moved and came up here to Chico. And when we got here to Chico, because I had just been able to sell my music store, I was looking around at what do you want me to do, Lord? Well, our church had a seminar up at Richardson Springs where Youth with a Mission has its headquarters here in Chico. To become a staff member and become a missionary with Youth with a Mission, all you had to do was to go to a 3-month discipleship training school and then go to 2 months worth of outreach after that, and you could join any one of the YWAM bases and be a staff member anywhere in the world. And there were like 1,400 bases all over the world. And so that really impressed me. And so my wife and I and our 3 children went and did a discipleship training school, and they had a program for the kids too. And it was just amazing. It was so life-changing because it was just, I could see another way of serving God, not only just by being a good person, but by actually going out and helping others more unfortunate than myself. And so after joining up with Youth with a Mission and doing our discipleship training school, I started what was called Mexico Adventures with Youth with a Mission here in Chico, California. And so for the last 30 years, I have been going down to Mexico about once a month, and either working with an orphanage down there or building a house for a poor person. And that has just been so gratifying to be able to help people that are very, very poor and have no way of helping themselves. They are picking tomatoes and strawberries and making 55 cents to 60 cents an hour, which is nowhere the way they're ever going to be able to get out of the rut or buy a house or have enough food to eat. And so each month now we take groups down and we help these folks, and we bring food, clothing, and other things that they need, and we also build houses for them. And it is just a total it's a total different feeling than when here I was in the business world making money with my music store, having to deal with a lot of people that were under the influence of a lot of things, or just had some crazy ideas about God, or didn't believe in God at all. And then to be able to actually start bringing groups of Christians and some non-Christians down to Mexico to help the poor people, it was like night and day, and it was just an amazing way to spend my life. And I have just been so blessed to be able to see how God has taken my life and used it in this way. And I've never looked back at my band days and say, gosh, I wish I had been a total rock and roll musician. I now know what God had in store for me, and I'm just so grateful to Him that He led me along a path that would help me to develop a ministry that could be blessing so many other people. And actually, when we go down and help these folks, we too are blessed. In fact, sometimes we're blessed more than the people down there, because we know that there is something else to this life rather than just thinking of yourself. And when you can pay it forward, when you can use your blessings that God has given you to help someone else and change their lives forever, that's what it's all about. And I think that's